In a story as vast as One Piece, there are multiple contenders for the final villain the Straw Hats are gonna face. Akainu, the man who brought our main character to his lowest moment, Imu, the ruler of the entire world with the power to erase his enemies from history itself, but I'm making the case that Marshall D. Teach has the personality, history, and lore to potentially be one of the greatest villains in manga period. But to explain why, we have to go back to the beginning. Teach's childhood is shrouded in mystery. We know almost nothing about it, besides him having a special lineage and being an orphan. One thing brought him comfort though: dreams. Living a miserable, destitute life, his dreams gave him hope, and he dreamed big. But he wasn't just a stupid kid with impossible dreams, because he was exceptional at visualizing what he wanted and making plans that could get him there. The most important part of his plan was obtaining a Del fruit, but not just any one. He studied all the known fruits in the encyclopedia, but one stood out to him, the only one that could possibly be enough for all the plans he had: the darkness fruit, the most abnormal but powerful Logia of them all. And to give himself the best chance of finding it, he knew he had to join a large powerful crew that would be coming across Del fruits often. And out of all of them, the Whitebeard pirates were the best choice. They were a large crew headed up by one of the great pirates of the era that also didn't care about the strength of their members and were famous for recruiting weak orphans to give a home to. Everything lined up perfectly, and Teach was easily able to join. But after years on the crew waiting for this fruit, he decided he had a good life, a family that loved and protected him, and he was happy with that. He decided that he'd be satisfied to live out his life as it was, but if he did come across the fruit, he would pursue the dreams he'd been so desperate for. And after 28 years of waiting, Teach's patience finally paid off. His fellow crewmate Thatch had found the fruit, and as per the rules of the ship, whoever found it could keep it. Teach had several options here. It's unknown if Thatch was gonna eat the fruit or take the other common path of selling it, but either way, Teach could have offered to buy it from him. He definitely had enough treasure saved after decades on an Emperor's crew for one Del fruit that seemingly no one else but him knew the true value of. Or he could have just been honest with Thatch. They were crewmates, brothers. If he said he'd been dreaming of having the fruit since he was a child, I don't see how they couldn't have come to an agreement. And I don't see Whitebeard forbidding him from leaving to pursue his dreams either. But no, Teach went the other way. And this is what sets him apart from more calculating villains like Doflamingo. It wasn't part of Teach's plan to anger the crew and have Ace go after him. There was no point making an enemy out of them at that moment. But Teach isn't the perfect mastermind. He has grand, complex plans, but is also careless. This is something that isn't often shown. The smartest people can also overlook things or be too focused in on one specific thing, and that's exactly what happened to him. The first piece of the puzzle to everything he'd ever wanted was in his hand, and from there, he was done with being patient. He took what was his and immediately left to start building his crew. The first encounter between two future emperors, but it didn't start like you might think. It wasn't a battle, a clash of ideologies, but just disagreeing on some food and drinks. But this means more than you think. This foreshadows and explains the relationship between the two perfectly. They're after the same thing, in this case ordering some food and drinks, but yet their reactions are the opposite. For example, Luffy picked his crew based on their personalities and above all else, them being good people. But on the other side, Blackbeard picked his crew based on only strength, making the level 6 Impel Down prisoners fight and bringing the last one standing on his crew. For the others, he meticulously picked them for their attributes: Van Augur for his sniping, Jesus Burgess for his strength, Doc Hu for his medical knowledge, and Lafitte for his stealth. He picked his crewmates like chess pieces on a board, having the essential tools he needed to get what he wanted. And on the other side, Luffy didn't care what his crewmates could do. He didn't even know Chopper was a doctor before inviting him on. The only thing he cared about was if they were good, genuine people, and Luffy was willing to fight even the entire world for his crew, while Blackbeard was willing to kill them without a second thought if they were in the way of his dreams. And speaking of dreams, we have to talk about the speech. As I said, Blackbeard and Luffy's methods are perfectly opposite, but the starting point is the same. They both have wild, unimaginable goals and dreams, and they aren't afraid to proudly chase them. But the perfect counter to that shows up: Bellamy. He doesn't believe in dreams. He thinks that this new era of piracy is all about getting rich, and anyone chasing dreams is wasting their time. And when he sees people like that, it drives him to anger, and he takes it all out on Luffy, beating him, smashing bottles over his head, but Luffy doesn't fight back, because it isn't worth it. Bellamy isn't on his level, and he doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't care if everyone laughs at him. The only thing that matters is that he believes in his dreams, and that's it. Blackbeard has a very similar mindset. He doesn't care what other people think either, but yet again, their methods are the opposite. Luffy let Bellamy hit him because there was no need to fight back, but later on, when Bellamy's crewmate pushes Blackbeard even a little bit, he doesn't hesitate to smash him into the ground. When Luffy leaves the restaurant, Blackbeard's outside, having heard everything. He yells out, mocking Bellamy's ideas that the age of dreams is over, and says that people's dreams don't ever end. And at that moment, it's only Blackbeard and Luffy. No one else around matters. They can laugh at him, mock him, but Blackbeard doesn't care. Those people mean nothing to him. But Luffy's special. Blackbeard had no idea who Luffy was at that point, but he took the time to talk to him, give him advice. He genuinely respects others who are chasing their wildest dreams, and he wants them to succeed. But when he discovers Luffy could be used to get closer to his dream, he throws all of that aside. Now, Luffy's a tool for him to use, and all his dreams don't matter anymore. This is one of the things that makes Blackbeard so interesting. He isn't indifferent to other people like most villains are. He has an ideology that everyone should be free to chase their dreams just like Luffy does. But unlike Luffy, who would never trample someone else's dreams for his own, Blackbeard will do that without a second thought. Basically, Blackbeard wants everyone to be free unless he can take their freedom to make himself more free. So he integrated Luffy into his plans, and after what he did at Eni's lobby, Blackbeard was more determined than ever to capture him. But Luffy would be saved by his brother. Ace finally caught up with him, and right here, Blackbeard set into motion a series of events that would change the entire world. He defeated Ace and turned him into the Marines, taking a spot on the Warlords as his reward for this. He used this position to be granted clearance in the Impel Down to free the level 6 prisoners as I said before, and once again Luffy and Blackbeard come across each other, now fully understanding who the other was. They had a small skirmish but were broken up by Jinbei, and Blackbeard let him go. He didn't hold a grudge for Luffy attacking him. Now that he no longer had any use for Luffy, he was happy to let him go back to pursuing his own dreams. But now comes the duality I mentioned before. Blackbeard had this whole grand plan set out, but he forgot to account for the biggest obstacle in his way at Impel Down, Magellan. He and his crew had no counter to his poison, and his entire journey should have ended there. But luckily, Shiryu saw the value he had, and he was able to continue with his plans. But at Marineford, after a long war, Ace died, and this broke Luffy. He had just spent days trying to save his brother, even giving up years of his lifespan, but it was all for nothing, and this led Luffy to his lowest point in the entire story, and this was all caused by Blackbeard, yet another link between the two of them. And speaking of him, it was now his chance to strike. This was the climax of almost 30 years of planning and waiting. He came face to face with the man he called father for all those years. To Blackbeard, Whitebeard represented the old era, and he was the new. He respected Whitebeard more than anyone else, but since he got old, Blackbeard viewed him as weak. But he did have one more use for him, but Whitebeard wouldn't let him have his way that easily. He tried with all of his might to kill his former son, despite Blackbeard's manipulation, so he took the coward's way out, and had his entire crew fire on the dying man. Blackbeard doesn't care what methods he uses, he doesn't have pride, at least not in the way that others do. He'll use any means necessary to get the upper hand and realize his dreams, no matter who he has to step over, even family. But now came the final act in this stage of his grand plan. He put a cloth over Whitebeard's body, and it's unknown just what he did in there, but when he emerged, he somehow stole his devil fruit, becoming the first person in recorded history to hold 2 fruits. He had the most powerful Logia, and now the most powerful Paramecia as well. Marco has a theory that this has to do with Blackbeard having a strange body, but that's all the detail we've been given so far. But now it was finally his time. He declared that it was his era and straight away got to work. He started taking over all of Whitebeard's old territories by fighting a war against his old family, and he won that war. He quickly became an emperor and expanded his crew, again the opposite of Luffy's approach, taking quantity over quality. He took over the island of Full-A-Lead, the island once controlled by the old Rocks crew, and that isn't the only connection Blackbeard has to Rocks, as he named his ship the Saber of Xebec. There have been countless theories about what these connections mean, but no matter what they do, it proves that Blackbeard is at the very least a spiritual successor to what Xebec was trying to do, which proves just how dangerous and important Blackbeard is. Xebec was Goldie Roger's greatest enemy, and so dangerous to Emu and the Elders that they had to erase his name from history, and Blackbeard himself has proved to be as big of a threat to Emu as both Luffy, the reawakening of Joy Boy, and Shirahoshi, an ancient weapon with the power to destroy the world. Blackbeard is in Emu's eyes on that level, and besides his mysterious origins and connections to Rocks, he also has 2 of the most powerful Devil Fruits in the world, and a genuine Emperor's crew at his command, and he still has more plans that haven't come to fruition yet. We also have to mention the connection between Blackbeard and Shanks. These two have been linked since childhood. They were both apprentices on the ships of the 2 great pirates of the era, and have been seemingly locked in a rivalry since then. Buggy mentions to Shanks that there was a rumor that Blackbeard hadn't slept a single night in his life, just one of the hints about his mysterious origins and biology. Sometime before the start of the story, Blackbeard and Shanks fought. Shanks said he didn't have his guard down, but he still got a massive scar from the fight anyway, using that to express the danger that Blackbeard posed. This is very significant. Shanks is the catalyst of this entire story. He's at the center of it all, and Blackbeard from their childhood has been built up to be his greatest rival. They are the Whitebeard and Roger of this generation, but they have a much darker and more serious rivalry than what they had. Shanks, the inspiration and idol of our main character, is obsessed with Blackbeard. He and all the things he's planning are Shanks' main focus. The reason we don't feel that is because this story is from the perspective of Luffy. If we'd been following Shanks this whole time, seeing them first meet, their huge fight where he got the scar, watching Blackbeard change the world of Marineford, and becoming an emperor in record time, things would look very different, and would make Shanks' worry and obsession make all the sense in the world. But from our perspective, Blackbeard is more of a background character as of right now. But he's doing so many things behind the scenes, so many things that you might just forget some. So here's a quick recap of just the past few months. He attacked and destroyed the entire revolutionary base at Baltico, killed Absalom and many other Devil Fruit users, stealing their fruits for his crewmates, which shows that this ability works on other people, not just himself, which shows the danger that this ability really poses. He then went to take Boa Hancock's fruit, but was stopped by Rayleigh, so instead captured Kobe, who is now a famous hero of the Marines, to hold for ransom. We later find out that he wanted to use Kobe as a bargaining chip for his island to become an official world government country for unknown reasons. After that, he sent out Van Augur as well as Kuzan, the former Admiral Aokiji, who he was also able to convince to join his crew, to capture Charlotte Pudding, and then waited at Winter Island after the fall of Big Mom and Kaido for either Kid Luffy or Law so he could ambush them. It turned out to be Law, and he completely demolished his entire crew, with Law barely being able to escape with his life. These moves all seem so random, but they definitely have a purpose. Blackbeard's plans on a grand scale are always well thought out. The trouble comes in the details, but recently every single move he's made has ended up with him on top, gaining more power, influence, and territory. And this entire time I purposely not mentioned what was said in chapter 1107, where Van Augur stated that their goal was the world itself. Again, directly parallel to what Rocks' goal was. In the same chapter, Devon says that they came to Egghead to complete a mission, and that they'd done so. The obvious conclusion is that by touching Saturn, Devon can now use her Devil Fruit to transform into him, which is an unbelievable asset to have, and shows that Blackbeard is making the biggest moves possible to take over the world. Besides this, it's mentioned that Teach has a special lineage, once again building up his origin. This reveal is gonna be huge. Teach's body and lineage have been mentioned multiple times at key moments, even being recognized by one of the elders. Whether it's him being part of a unique race or his family line, whatever the reveal ends up being, will definitely shake up the entire foundation of the story. Now let's talk about aura. It's something everyone looks to from a villain and is a huge critique of Blackbeard. He doesn't have the overwhelming presence of someone like Emu, but that's by design. Blackbeard's entire character revolves around him moving in the background, only bringing himself into the spotlight at the perfect moment. He was in the shadows for decades on Whitebeard's crew until he made his move. He then went back into his shadows forming his own crew, but when the chance to capture Ace came, he took it. He then went back behind the scenes until he could make his biggest move yet at Marineford, and then secured his spot as an emperor. But now after that is once again making all these moves relatively low key, especially from our perspective, since he's mostly making them off screen. But mark my words, this has always been his pattern. He's overshadowed by everything else happening, until he isn't. And when all his plans fall into place and he's ready to strike, he'll once again be at the center of this story. And with it being the final saga, he will make that move very soon. Another thing people have a problem with is his personality. There have been many theories about him maybe having a split personality or something similar, but regardless, many times he ends up looking like an idiot, looking uncool, vulnerable, and people don't like that in a villain. People like a calm, stoic villain with cold one-liners, but as I've said many times, Blackbeard is a mirror of our main character. And who is that? Monkey D. Luffy. The man with the most ridiculous power in the world, with a personality to match. Every great villain is a reflection of the hero, and Blackbeard is that character for Luffy, and has been all along. Someone like Emu, purely stoic and evil with seemingly no personality beyond that, just isn't a compelling final villain for a main character as unique and full of personality as Luffy. There needs to be someone to match that energy, and Blackbeard can do it better than anyone else. So in conclusion, everything I've seen points to Blackbeard being the final villain, his mysterious backstory yet to come, his power, influence, and potential, his links to the greatest enemy of the Pirate King, alongside his history with the main character's idol, and most importantly, the connection to the main character himself. These two are intertwined in so many ways, and that's by design. Oda has been setting up these two to meet at the top in spectacular fashion for almost 1,000 chapters now. Blackbeard was introduced way before any of these other contenders, and I believe that's for very good reason. And though it may seem a bit trivial, the name does matter. Would Oda give a character the name of the most famous pirate in history in a story about pirates just for him to end up as a side villain? Well, I've said my piece, so I guess that's up for you to decide now.